Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the November 7th Minnesota Safe Routes to School Network call. I'm very excited to be here with you all this morning. My name is Elissa Shuffman. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the Interim Executive Director at Move Minnesota. I help facilitate the call. Would love it if folks could introduce yourselves in the chat with your name, pronouns, where you're calling in from. And I'm very excited about today's icebreaker, which is a moment you loved from Walk to School Day. I really am very excited to hear all your favorite moments, all the moments you loved from Walk to School Day. Before we jump into today's presentation, just a little bit about who we are as a network. We are hundreds of dedicated professionals from schools, from organizations, agencies that are advancing safe routes to school across Minnesota to make sure that students, no matter their background, can walk and bike on routes that are safe, comfortable, and convenient because those are the things that we value as a community. I already introduced myself. As you know, Max Singer, my partner in chaos, is handling all of the behind the scenes things on today's call. So thank you to Max for doing the slides, doing the recording, making sure that things are going smoothly. And that next up, we will have our team from MNDOT doing the ever beloved MNDOT update. We'll hear from Michael about the school start time study, which I'm really excited about as somebody who chronically struggled to get up for school in the morning when school was starting very early. So very interested in the results of the study. And then we'll spend some time as a group sharing out about the national conference that just happened. So really excited to hear folks' highlights and takeaways from the conference. So full call today. With that, I will stop sharing and kick it over to Kelly and the MNDOT team to introduce themselves and start the update.
All right, let me just get my screen going and pop it open. All right, you're able to see it okay?
Yep.
Cool. All right, thanks everyone. Happy Thursday of November. I know it's a little rainy out there. But we got a nice little MNDOT update of things that are happening. Again, I'm Kelly Corbin, the Safe Routes Coordinator. Sophie Kalo is on the call. She's also on our Safe Routes team, and Phoebe Ward. If you are a grantee, you've maybe been working with Phoebe on some of our grant projects there. So we are our partners at Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota that we hire as consultants for our Walk Bike Fun program are looking to get scheduled some spring regional workshops that are train the trainer for the Walk Bike Fun curriculum, where you could send your bike advocates, your PE teachers, your health teachers, or others who'd want to do it. And so, you know, if you just have two PE teachers, reach out. We're looking to kind of do some more regional workshops. So there's lots of opportunity to plan and make something that works great for you. Just to call out as you're dropping all your stories in for Walk to School Day, we have our winning photo from Lake Crystal School District in South Central Minnesota. Such a fun, beautiful kind of picture that ties in well to our kind of research project that we'll talk next. We did have 185 schools participate across the state, and we were fortunate enough to have the governor also provide a proclamation for the day, kind of showing that top-down support for walking and biking. Oops. There we go. One more thing I'll just call out. A big shout out to Sarah Stewart, who helped organize a wonderful Walk to School Day at St. Paul and was so gracious to allow MNDOT leadership to attend and see what Safe Routes is all about. And this is a picture of MNDOT's commissioner reading a walking biking story to some students in the St. Paul School District. So a fun way again to show our leadership what the work looks like and get them kind of involved so they value safe routes and see all the good things it can do for our communities across the state. Next up on February 5th is Winter Walk to School Day. Registration is open. Registration happens through our Minnesota page, since we are the only state that celebrates Winter Walk to School Day. But again, if you register, we'll mail you out a packet of stickers and zipper pulls and goodies So your school will have some materials to celebrate. Sophie will be dropping a link to that registration page and where all of our resources are. Maybe it's a big event that you're going to host, or maybe it's something smaller where you're just sending home some winter walking and biking safety information. Oops. Just to call out again, we do have our, DOT page, which maybe is where you go for grants, but we also have our Minnesota Safe Routes to School Resource Center, which is a separate page, mnsaferoutestoschool.org. This is where all of our guides and toolkits and resources and training and network call recordings or our e-news is all posted there. So Sophie will drop that link, but just a reminder that there's a lot of good things on there to take a look. The search feature up top is my favorite, and the website also will translate into a couple other languages if that's something that's needed. So many of you are probably excited that all of our grants that we talked about at last network call are open and they are out. So this includes planning assistance, which went live on the website last Monday. And Boost Grants also went live last Monday. So planning assistance is a great place to start out with your work or relaunch your work. Boost Grants give you some of that programmatic support. If you are in the process of planning assistance, you can still apply for Boost Grants, or you can still apply for design assistance, which will help you understand some more of those engineering needs and give you some more pieces to the puzzle to be successful when you apply for infrastructure funds, which are also open. We have our state aid infrastructure grants, the Safe Routes to School state infrastructure funding, which does not require a cost share. And then in Greater Minnesota, there's the Transportation Alternatives Program that's every fall, and Safe Routes to School is an eligible activity under that, but that is a federal program that requires a cost share. If you have questions about grants, we have our office hours, which are 30 minutes twice a month. So, you certainly can send us a question via email. We will do our best to respond to that. Some things do get buried in inboxes. So if you haven't heard from us or have any questions, you got a barrier, you're looking for a resource, you can hop on, talk to us, and we will help you solve that problem, send you resources, and follow up with you if you still have some more questions. So make sure you're plugging away or putting those office hours on your calendar. And that is all I have. I will stop sharing. Any quick questions for me before we hand it over to our primary presenter?
I think there was one question in the chat, which I'll just verbalize since we don't put the chat with the recordings, which was around registering schools for Winter Walk to School Day, and a question around, can one person register multiple schools?
Yeah, great question. We do have a lot of our public health partners or Safe Routes to School coordinators in school districts that will register all the schools that are participating for them. So that is certainly something you can do, and just takes a little off of your school partner's plate to do that. So awesome. You can certainly register lots of schools. The one thing I'll make note is whatever that address is that's in the registration is where we're mailing things. So if it makes more sense to put the local school partner's name on it, but you register on behalf of them, that's fine too. Just know that wherever that address is where we're going to mail out those packets, and then give your partners a heads up that they're coming in January so they don't just toss them or send them back to us, which does happen on occasion. Any other questions?
Not seeing anything in the chat for now, and not seeing any folks raising hands, so I think we'll keep moving. But if anything else surfaces, folks, feel free to put that in the chat. I'm loving seeing some of the Walk to School Day highlights. Lots of folks citing just joy as a major motivator for the day, and also very excited that there is in Chisago County, there's a mascot that is a Viking that is greeting the kids. I cannot wait to see photos at some future point. So with that, I think we will toss it over to Michael to talk to us a little bit about school start time study. I'm very excited to see what you have to share, Michael. And maybe you can introduce yourself as well. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So hopefully everyone can see the slides. Yeah, awesome. Okay, hopefully you can see it now. Yeah, so I'm Michael Levin. I'm an associate professor at the University of Minnesota in the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Geoengineering. And this is a project that I worked with MNDOT for, with Kelly was the technical liaison or project champion. So I kind of work on transportation network modeling. Usually the problems I try to study are like, where is traffic congestion forming? How do people change their behavior in response to traffic congestion patterns, and how does that interact with traffic congestion? But so a lot of the methods trying to predict what people behave are kind of relevant to the choice of, do you drive to school or walk or bike to school or something else. So the goal of this project was kind of looking at how do different school times affect students walking and biking. Specifically, really primarily interested in elementary school students, and a lot of the elementary schools start at around 7:30. Some start at 8, but it's early enough that, especially in the winter or with the times changes, we end up with those schools starting around sunrise or slightly before sunrise, and so students would have to travel before sunrise. And so the question that I was getting given as a project to answer, the primary question is, does that affect or especially reduce the number of elementary school students who are choosing to take active transportation? The secondary question is that now that we're gathering this data to explain that, can we try to understand why people choose or do not choose to walk or bike to school? So I tried to conduct a fairly comprehensive study. I'll take you through it, and hopefully I think the results of the various analyses are fairly consistent here. So the first thing I tried to do was looking at streetlight data collection. Streetlight is, for those of you who don't know, it's a mobile source data provider. They gather information from people's smartphones. They don't really release it's proprietary data. They don't really release exactly how they're doing it. But if you go onto their website, and MNDOT has accesses, you can look at their car trips. They'll report like numbers of car trips. They'll report walking and biking. They'll report these things. Now, I've been working with the streetlight for a different project on walking and biking, and I would say their walking and biking data is not great, but there's a way to overcome that. So here's kind of the motivation. Now, of course, obviously, I want to ask people what they're doing. Are they walking or biking to school? I want to ask them why, but the problem with just asking people is that there's kind of a lot of response bias. People don't necessarily respond accurately due to maybe they don't remember things, maybe they have a rosy picture of themselves, or the people who choose to respond are biased. So it's better to, if we can observe people directly. Now, trying to observe people in schools, that's going to be hard. That's taking a lot of time, but we can get streetlight data, mobile source data, to try to observe that. Now, as I said, streetlight's data on walking, biking is not great. So instead, what I'm going to try to do is look at their data on car trips. And kind of assuming that, if we're talking elementary school students, if someone is being driven to school, they're probably being driven by a parent or guardian. That parent or guardian is probably old enough, and they'll have a smartphone to track as well. Whereas some kid walking, biking to school, especially doing so alone, may not be tracked without a smartphone. So what we're trying to do, here's kind of a image of what streetlight data collection looks like, is that we can kind of look around the school and we can get a satellite view of the school in Google Maps. Now, streetlight's not going to tell us how many people are going to that school, but they will tell us trips to a specific street. So we can look at how many parents are driving their kids around the school and hopefully dropping them off. I mean, you don't exactly know the trip purpose, but especially if we look at weekday mornings, you have a kind of a good sense that a lot of them are taking their kids to school or either driving to school because they work there. So we did some streetlight data collection. I'm going to kind of spare the details, except for some key highlights. We looked at trips from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. on weekdays, trying to capture anyone going to the school. So that will include employees and of course parents taking kids to school. We were trying to compare different months. So we chose September, February, and April. This was conducted in 2022 to 2023 school year because that's where we had data. And we focused on schools in Minneapolis and St. Paul public school districts because as I looked on the website, they both have some schools that start at 7:30, some that start at 9:30, and some in between. And that's really nice because then we can kind of avoid the differences caused by school districts and just focus on the differences caused by different start times. We also looked at community schools because magnet schools might have students coming from farther away. We did have a few outliers that we thought were just due to errors in streetlights or how we're collecting data, so we removed those. Here's kind of the main graphs of the results. What we're plotting is car trips versus enrollment. And you can see kind of the trend line, but these are actually really messy to interpret. So this is like September travel. And the next one is February travel. An idea here is that if students are trying to avoid walking or biking to school due to those early start times, we would expect to see more car trips in February than in September, because in September you've got nice sunrise, you got good weather. In February, you're traveling before sunrise. We wanted to avoid December and January because of the holidays messing things. And of course, March has daylight savings time. So we also want to look at after, can we get the effects of weather versus the effects of start times? So we also looked at April because especially in 2023, it was not super great in terms of the weather, and the sunrise times are going to be a bit later too. So the sunrise times will be earlier in April, so that the students will be able to walk to school after the sun. So we could kind of compare that. And again, these graphs are not super easy to interpret. So what we did here was we created a linear regression model. And what this is looking at is various different variables that we thought might be important or might not. Some of the important ones that we really care about is, of course, enrollment. We're going to see more car trips when there's higher enrollment before 8:30. So this is like, what's the effect of a school starting earlier on the earlier side before 8:30 versus afterwards. We use 8:30 as kind of a midpoint between the 7:30 and 9:30 schools. And then we're also looking at the effects of different months. So like, how much does month affect things? There are a lot of variables here. We looked at some demographics as well. I'm going to kind of trim this down to the variables we found that were significant in our model. And you can kind of see there's an interesting effect here that we're kind of seeing that's kind of consistent, which is, first, there are more car trips in September. The positive coefficient means that there's September is associated with an increase. The second thing is that starting before 8:30 is associated with a decrease in car trips. We thought that was kind of unusual. So I wanted to do kind of another model like this that's maybe focused on the data looking at data in a different way, just to kind of confirm. So we looked at just the schools starting before 8:30 a.m., kind of like ignoring the schools with later start times, just kind of focus on, okay, schools before 8:30 a.m., how do the different months, February, September, April, affect travel? So here's what we see. In September, there are more car trips. February is the baseline of this model, so that's why it's 0 here. September, more car trips. April, there's slightly more car trips. So in other words, it looks like there are more students walking or biking to school in February when they're early, they're traveling early to school and sunrise is late, which is not consistent with what you would expect if the early start times are discouraging students from traveling because of starting before sunrise. Okay, so that's kind of linear regression results. We have a lot more results in the final report, which will get published at some point, but that's kind of the main highlight, is that when we look at the observation of car trips, we see there are more car trips in September, so we can we're kind of inferring that students are walking or biking to school less in September than in February. Okay, so that was our direct observation. Now, of course, we want to ask people and see, what are they doing? What do they say they're doing? And second, what do they say about why they're doing it? Because you really can't get that from Streetlight, but we want to know what people think about why they're choosing to walk or bike to school or not. So what we did was we created a survey in Qualtrics and sent it out to schools in the metro area. I contacted many principals. There's some people who were very willing to support, other people who didn't have time. So of course, asking people is messy. When we send this out, we also have the issue of we can send this to parents, but that doesn't mean they'll actually respond to it. So that's kind of another issue. But so, there are limitations with this data and there are limitations to streetlight data. And that's why I'm trying to kind of look at both to get more consistent picture. So what we did was, we're talking about elementary school students here. So we primarily surveyed the parents. I don't think elementary school children can be trusted to give a very accurate picture of what they're doing, but their parents are probably sufficiently involved and aware of what their children are doing at the elementary school age. So we're kind of surveying the parents about their students. In terms of importance, I thought that if we were to ask parents, do you care about your student traveling or walking or biking to school before sunrise? Parents would probably say yes. They don't like that. It's just kind of how you phrase the question. So instead of phrasing it that way, and also to collect more information, what we did was we asked the parents to rate the importance of various factors. And those factors range from safety, neighborhood crime, crossing a busy road, traveling before sunrise or after sunset, that's one that we are particularly caring about, and child's age in terms of parents' perception of their independence. Second, convenience. So parent guardian travel plans, like when do they drive to work, driving times, vehicle speeds, traffic congestion, are they trying to avoid traffic congestion around schools or carpooling with other students? Maybe that encourages car travel. Comfort conditions, like weather conditions, safe options for walking or biking. Are there sidewalks or crosswalks that that are available or not? Distance to school, because people don't like traveling long distances, and child's interest in physical activity. And so we didn't label them as comfort, safety, and convenience. We just gave the parents a list and asked them to rank them from 1 to 11. Then we also asked about their travel behavior. How many times per week does your child walk, bike, get driven, take a bus, something else to school? It was forced to add to 5 by the software that we use for a survey, so these answers should make sense. And then we get some demographic information like race, ethnicity, gender of the parents that's sending a child to school, household income, number of cars in household, just to see if that was related as well. Okay, so here's how I distributed the survey. Again, I was trying to focus on Minneapolis and St. Paul public schools, but not all the principals were supportive. And furthermore, Minneapolis public schools and St. Paul have this Department of Research, Evaluation, and Assessment, and you have to get approval from. And Minneapolis rejected. They did not give approval. St. Paul did. So we also, next to Kelly and other TAP members, were able to distribute this at some other school districts, Richfield, Rochester, Minnetonka, and try to get some responses there. Overall, we got 436 responses from parents, definitely quite small compared to the number of parents that I think this was sent to, but it's still large enough that we can get some good trends out of the data. Okay, so here's what we have in terms of the stated importance of travel factor. I think this part is probably interesting, both in terms of trying to evaluate the importance of early start times and also just what people care about. Now, the way this ranking works is that the higher rankings are kind of less important. So like the parents were asked to rank things like 1 through 11. So like the 1 was the most important. So the lower the average, the better, the more parents care about it, right? Okay, so here we can see that there are a couple things that are showing up as important. Option 1, option 2, option 6, option 11. Those are kind of the 4 most important things, right? 1 and 2, child's age, distance to school. Not super surprising there. People don't like to walk long distances, that's known. 6 was comfortable and safe options for walking or biking, such as sidewalks, crosswalks, bike trails. 11 is crossing a busy road. So those are the 4 things that are most important here. Some of the things that are not important, neighborhood crime, probably because you're not really picking on young kids anyways. Carpooling was not really listed as important. If we look at traveling before sunrise or after sunset, the one where that was the motivation for the study, it's kind of in the middle, right? So it's somewhat important. Parents care about it, but they don't care about it nearly as much as like busy road or having sidewalks available. Okay, so that's kind of, I'd say, somewhat consistent with the streetlight results. in the sense that, you know, we can see what parents are caring about, and early start times are somewhat important, but not the most important thing. Here we can look at that separately. So we looked at importance of traveling for sunrise. There's a kind of a distribution there. It is centered around like the middle, so it's, you know, parents are kind of consistent about that being important. We looked at whether parents of students who have early start times respond differently. So that's what the right graph is saying, like, just schools that have earlier start times, do they care about traveling before sunrise more? And the answer is not really. The graphs are very similar. Obviously not exactly the same, but, you know, very similar kind of responses. Okay, so that's kind of, you know, what parents say they care about. We also asked the parents to explain what their child is doing, like what's their behavior. And so here's kind of what we're trying to analyze is, you know, what are the frequencies of travel modes for different schools. So like if we have schools with late start times, we can see here on the left is the active transportation, walking or biking. All of students are being driven or taking the bus. That's for late start times. We can compare with early start times, where we see that there are many students being driven still. There are fewer students taking the bus, but there are actually more students taking after transportation here. Still small, right? Like average 0.5 times per week per student, but it's definitely larger than what we have for late start times. So we're trying to get more of a kind of a mathematically rigorous way of analyzing this. The standard way of predicting what people choose for this sort of choice, like you have a fixed origin, fixed destination, you're trying to decide, do you drive, walk, bike, take the bus? This is a mode choice problem, and the typical approach is a Loja model. So that's what we did. Well, we try to predict the utility of each mode option, like what's the utility of driving, what's the utility of walking or biking, and using observations, we can calibrate a model. It's kind of like linear regression, except it's logistic. They're discrete choices, so it's a logistic regression problem. I'll kind of spare, I'm happy to go through math, but I'm kind of going to spare that because I don't think that's the point of what we're here for, and it's kind of standard anyways. So here's what we end up with as the coefficients. Now we're looking at, or what I'm plotting here is the utility for walking or biking. So a positive coefficient in this table indicates a higher utility and a higher probability of using active transportation. Okay, so here are the coefficients. The magnitude of the coefficient is not necessarily meaningful in this comparison because the variables have different units. So that's just something to consider, but we can definitely see that distance has a very high negative magnitude coefficient. It lines up with what parents say, that high distance means people don't like to walk or bike. There's various coefficients. There's one for gender, income. Early school start times has a positive coefficient. And if you remember, that indicates that there's a higher utility or a higher probability of walking or biking. So in other words, we're kind of seeing the opposite of what we might have predicted, which is that when schools start early, even though there are some early start times before sunrise, you know, we're still actually seeing more walking and biking. I will note that the survey was given out in late February, early March, with the explicit goal of having parents very consciously aware of early sunrise times, late sunrise times, early school start times. So the idea is that, I mean, we're not explicitly reminding them, but they're in that period of time where they would have late sunrise times and notice that students would be walking before sunrise possibly. Okay, so I just want to give you a thank you to the undergraduate students that helped me do all these analyses, and then I'll kind of give some overall takeaways, right? What did we learn here? So I would say we've conducted 3 separate analyses. There's one that was on observation. There was one that, you know, using streetlight data. Second analysis was using a stated preference for what parents say they care about. And the third analysis was using parents' stated travel choices for their kids. All 3 of them, I would say, kind of show that early school start times or starting before sunrise is not a major factor. It's not really affecting or limiting students from walking or biking to school. In some cases, it seems like it even increases students walking or biking to school, probably due to other things like maybe it's convenient for parents or something else. But it did seem that if we look at the early, like the late sunrise times compared with early school start times, those early school start times are not limiting walking and biking. Personally, this is kind of surprising to me. I was not expecting to see this result, but I think it is consistent across the three analyses that we did. And so I would say it's fairly, you know, robust result here. I also looked at the published scientific literature to see if anyone had tried to look at this sort of issue before. No one has. People have looked at the importance of safe options like sidewalks, crossing busy roads, that sort of thing, on reducing walking or biking. No one's really looked at school start times, so I think this is the first study here, but the results seem to be fairly consistent. So I think we have a strong answer for now. So thank you for attending. I have like some backup results, but that's kind of the end of what I plan to talk about. So I'm happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Michael. Oh my gosh, this was so much information and very cool to see. And so, like for me, surprising, right? As someone who um was not particularly good at getting up and moving in the morning. That early start times are in some ways more at least not necessarily a deterrent for students walking to school. So I feel like personally I need to watch your whole presentation again to absorb it all because there was just so much here. It's very cool. So I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. I was trying to keep an eye on the chat and I don't think I saw anything. But I'll pause for a second to make sure if anybody wants to come off mute or ask some questions that we have a second for that.
I have a question. Has there been any consideration to look at what kids' extracurricular activities before or after school may have an impact on their walking? For example, kids that are involved in band, that it's early on, they are taking instruments back and forth, or they're in football practice and they've got lots of equipment or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just wondering if that might weigh into some of that, if there's any impact in that arena at all.
Yeah, that's possible. We did not specifically ask that question about carrying things or extracurricular activities. It was elementary school, so I guess I wasn't expecting a whole lot, but yeah, maybe that's part of it too, why people are driving. But I mean, I think we were trying to compare like early versus late school start times. And for that, I'm not sure that the extracurriculars would affect that variable so much. Like at least we have a robust finding on the effective start times or lack of effect on walking and biking.
Yeah, unless those extracurriculars were before or after school, was my other thought.
Right. Maybe it's for different schools, it could be changing things.
And I'll just jump in here too. We're really fortunate to have funded this study through MNDOT's Office of Research and Innovation, which does a call for research questions through MNDOT. That should be coming up here in a couple months. I believe it's usually like March. So if anyone on the call has ideas of research that would be helpful for your local or regional efforts or other things that keep coming up in conversations of like you don't have data to help make the case that you need to make, please email any of us or a general email with those ideas for research that you need. It can be things looking at like policy level changes like school start times. It also can be like figuring out better school speed zone configurations and what that could look like. So it can be both policy or kind of engineering infrastructure strategies. So keep those wheels turning. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any other research ideas. But we still have time if there's any more questions.
I actually did think of one, which was I'd love for you to just talk a little bit more about the like transit piece and school bus piece and how you were thinking about like you drew some really clear lines, like connected some dots around your thinking with weather and sunrise and sunset and how that sort of transferred to people walking and biking or students walking and biking. Um, but I think some of the things you said about like students not necessarily carrying cell phones also would hold true with bus travel. And so just wondering like if how you were thinking about that, accounting for that.
Yeah, so we kind of accounted for that directly when we asked parents how their students get to school. So we could explicitly ask about school buses. When we're doing the streetlight data, so like all the data here, yeah, we couldn't directly account for that because a lot of them elementary schools, students don't have cell phones. So what we were looking at primarily was expecting like car trips. I also don't think a bus trip would register the same way as a car trip in streetlight because it would, you've got kind of like a whole bus of people going together versus like a car. So that's one reason why I think this data really just shows car trips, and you can kind of try to infer walking and biking, but you can't really distinguish between walking and biking versus bus trips. So we're kind of limited to the stated preference data for that.
Cool.
I have
Thanks.
a question.
Oh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Sarah.
I am just wondering about the surveys, the parent surveys, and if you have a little more on who responded to that, like who, like the demographics or, St. Paul versus like other school districts, just to kind of understand who was responding. And maybe I missed it because I was interrupted while I was during this. So, okay, yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't put a lot on there. I'm trying to see if I have, I'm sure I brought the slides. Because, yeah, we did more analyses, and I don't have it with me.
That's
But
okay. I was just curious
if
if
you
like how
email me, I can.
representative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you like, we have the results, and they will
Okay.
be published too in the final report. So it's not like I mean, I'm
Okay.
definitely trying to make them public, but I didn't.
I'm not trying to
I
put
keep
you on
this
the
like
spot.
15 minutes too. So
Yeah, that sounds like a great. I'll just follow up. Thank you.
thanks.
Cool. Not seeing any other, excuse me, not seeing any other folks come off mute. But if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. And it sounds like you'll be getting some follow-up.
Sounds good.
Michael.
Yeah, please.
Cool. Well, thank you again. That was really informative, very interesting, and definitely a lot for us to think about how that translates to our work. With that, I'm going to, we have about 20 minutes left, so I am going to thank Michael for his time one more time, and then toss it to Kelly and Sophie to kick us off in some share outs from the National Safe Routes to School Conference that happened earlier this fall. I'm very excited to hear some of the highlights, what you learned, and maybe hear from some other folks on the call too who had the chance to attend and engage in some community-based learning.
Sounds great. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for that research project. I think it's so good. It came about because we had local public health interested in, is school start times a policy change that we should be looking at? Or our Safe Routes coordinators, if policy change around school start times would impact walking and biking. So it's nice to have some of that data to build from. But shifting gears, we had the Safe Routes to School National Conference was in Fort Collins, I think 2 weeks ago now. We had a really strong Minnesota contingent at the conference doing lots of presentations, sharing the great work that they're doing. So I did message a few of you on the side to see if you're able to share something from the national conference. It could be an aha moment, a link or a resource, a conversation you had, or anything like that. And then we'll kind of go out from there. I'll start first and then I'll throw it over to Sophie. So I'm going to drop a few different links into the chat box and talk about a couple things that I thought were really cool that seem like they fit some of the needs we have here. One is from Portland. They have started a new transportation academy for their high school Safe Routes program. It's 5 different lessons that includes walking, biking and micromobility and e-bikes. One is safe driving. The other one is forms of transit and doing some travel training there. And then the 5th one is kind of climate change. So a really cool, I think, potentially replicable curriculum. And then one of the other pieces in high school too was a high school created Reboot Your Commute. So thinking about what safe routes looks like in high schools is a conversation we're all having now that that shift has been made nationally that safe routes is K through 12. And it's a great way to take like a walk to school day, but maybe flip it for high schoolers and have them think about how those teenagers could reboot their commute in a different way. And then the other 2 things there are a mobile traffic garden trailer. So it has both materials to do an external or outside bike rodeo, and it also has the materials to actually have like a safety course that rolls out inside that you could do bike safety courses, bike rodeos inside gyms during the winter, which has some practicality here in Minnesota's winters. And then a similar trailer for bike maintenance for rural areas or areas that don't have access to bike shops or bike mechanics to go out and support events or support bike fleets. So some links there. I have pages of notes. We'll keep sharing and building on these ideas. The next Safe Routes Conference will be in 2026. So we'll keep you posted on that, but I'm going to turn it over to Sophie and she can share some of her thoughts.
Hi, everyone. Done. Kelly and I are both in the same room, so technology is hard sometimes. 2 things I would share. One of them was Denver highlighted a celebrity crossing guard program. So getting folks from the community that maybe have a little bit more say or sway with policies and programming to come out during the walk and bike to school day events. And one of the main takeaways from it was that they were able to reach middle school and high school students because of these local either radio hosts or TV or news or podcast folks coming in and really talking to students about the safety of walking and biking. So that was a really cool thing. And then shout out to Sarah and Justin from St. Paul. We had a presentation about inclusivity of high school students, specifically kiddos that are 18 to 22 that might need additional schooling and needs to get around. And Sarah can maybe allude to what all we talked about, but one of the big takeaways was that there's so much we can be doing for these individuals that maybe we haven't thought about in the traditional Safe Routes to School K through 8. For example, how do they engage in daily transportation from getting to getting job experience, the whole barrier with winter. And there was a whole conversation. We could have went for hours. I think it was 2 hours and we kind of had to wrap it up. But the one really fun, exciting thing is that this conversation is going to continue. So if you are interested in high schoolers in this inclusive, diverse kind of curriculum and how do we approach these students to meet their needs, we'll drop the regular Safe Routes email in and you can send us a note. And this group that presented is having ongoing conversations of how to create materials and how to best meet these students. So if you're interested, we would love for you to join that conversation. Back to you, Kelly.
All right, thank you for that. I just dropped another one in that was kind of a cool novel idea too from Austin, Texas, which has a sustainability plan. And then the school district developed their own sustainability plan to mimic it. So things like electrification of their yellow school bus fleet, supporting safe routes to school, thinking of school siting that won't increase transportation emissions, solar panels, all sorts of cool stuff. So kind of a newer idea for the work. I know we have a few other folks on the call who went. I don't know if Mallory is available to hop off or
Yeah,
hop
I can go,
on.
Kelly. Hi, so Mallory Jarvie with West Central Initiative. I presented at the conference with a group about engagement practices for youth and communities, and I'll share a LinkedIn post from the Safe Routes Partnership. I was able to present with Corey Johnson. She is one of the great leads at the Safe Routes Partnership nationally. So one of my aha moments is that people are very curious. I had so many questions about my engagement toolkit, which was a bike with footprints on it, so rubber stamped animal footprints, and I had people push it on paper, and it was on a bike, a one-wheel bike. So people were able to engage with it. And so many people are saying this is a great art project, or you can use it in the snow. A lot of fun opportunities. And we also did Safe Routes to School storytelling using different modes of transportation and using different animal characters we have. And people are just so motivated and want to build these themselves. And so I got a lot of questions about how to build this, but I didn't build it. So I was hoping, I tried my best. But people are really excited to get kids engaged in Safe Routes to School. Some other workshops that I attended that were really inspirational was Girls with Gears and how to get girls on bikes. Really enjoyed that and learning their curriculum base and how to empower women along with getting them empowered on a bike. So almost two different objectives. And then a really interesting conversations about how to have Safe Routes to School and e-bikes in the same conversation. I know it's going to be interesting coming up the next couple of years, and I know Minnesota, it's 15 and younger can't be on an e-bike. So I'm interested to see where that goes. And then a side conversation I had, similar to what Kelly mentioned, was a traffic garden pop-up, where a woman from, I believe, Raleigh has a traffic garden toolkit that they can whip out in half a day, so they can shut down a street, and then they build it using just duct tape that they have on hand. And they have all the signs in a mobile trailer, and they have a crew of people who mobilize and get it ready to go. So just interesting to see how maybe we could replicate that in Minnesota or even in our region. But that was very inspirational. Thank you, Kelly.
That's great. Thanks again for presenting and representing
Yeah.
Minnesota so well, Mallory. Let's see, Sarah Stewart, I think I saw you. If you're willing to share
Yeah,
anything.
sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yeah, I had a great time also. I did present, like Sophie said, on some work we're doing with a special education transition program with the older students. And we did a big walk audit with them for some routes that they walk to get to bus stops to take the city bus for during the school day. And it's been a great project and something we're continuing to work on, and kind of highlights also just like the importance of neighborhoods around schools being accessible, not just for the trip to school, but for learning and learning opportunities and accessing the community. And you know, the teacher that one of the teachers in that program came with me is one who he also does travel instruction, so he supports high school students as part of their individualized education programs or IEPs to do travel training. And so that's how we kind of got connected, and just like another opportunity that we see to kind of figure out how to work together. He's even started, like last year, he even got a bike so a student could learn how to like do combined bike and bus trips, transit trips. So just a lot of great opportunities there. And kind of going back to the transition program, like the teacher said, he's like 99% of those students will never be drivers. So like it is really important that we do this work and that we think about it in the context even of Safe Routes to School, and not just like how do we train them how to use transit, but how do we use our Safe Routes tools to look at kind of the larger environment and the other ways that we can help support students in thinking about how they get around. So that was great. And then the conversation we had with other people working on the same things was also very interesting. And I hope that we kind of continue this conversation. And then just a couple, I just found like kind of some of my takeaways. I just was like really inspired by some of the scale of some of the things that people are doing. Like in Austin, Texas, they got all this kind of funding through, I don't know, citywide ballot initiative or something to do infrastructure improvements. And they have done like walk audits and prioritization at every single school of infrastructure issues. And that's amazing and like would be great to have. I also heard from a few places like that are starting to think about attendance as one way to prioritize work, because that trip to school is an important part of getting to school. So how do we make that easier and better for people? So I'm thinking about that. And then I got to go to Fort Collins, an elementary school in Fort Collins, and look at some adaptive biking equipment and their adaptive biking work, and just really inspiring. They get 100% of their kids, 4th and 5th graders, on a bike field trip every year, including all their kids with disabilities. And I was like, that is, something to aspire to. And I'm really excited to think about that going forward for my takeaways.
It's so wonderful. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate you presenting and also sharing out today. CJ or Angela, our fearless Bike Amend team, either of you have some takeaways to share out?
Yeah, I'll chat. I presented as part of a couple of presentations, but one of them that we did was kind of a gathering for educators doing this work across the country. So it was a 2-hour session. I was really nervous that nobody would come, and we had to like bring in extra chairs. And so there were 6 of us from different organizations across the country that kind of had been meeting for the last 6 months, talking about ways to just offer up a space for people doing this education work to kind of brainstorm and skill share. So we had some stations set up about, I co-facilitated a station with someone from Colorado about how do you actually get programming to happen in schools? Like, who are the right people to talk to? What does it take? And we kind of talked about the different barriers that people experience, and crowdsourced some different antidotes for those barriers. We had a station all about like, how do you teach this kind of thing if you don't have access to bikes? Which was really interesting, just about like different innovative ways to teach basic safety skills without having a bike fleet available to you. Another station also kind of about different ways to teach different things. So like different games to identify problems on a bike. So we brought in a bike and had some different kind of creative ways to engage with, like, how do you know if this doesn't work? And just identifying through like sound and visual, which is really interesting. And it was just really thrilling to be in a room of people who were like excited to chat together and who were really grateful to be like, oh gosh, like, especially at a conference when you're doing a lot of like absorbing information, to be able to have a really kind of like collaborative time together, it felt really special. And from there we collected contact information and have started the very beginning of kind of like a national educators hangout, which is really exciting. And then I attended a bunch of different sessions that I really liked, one of which was in Fort Collins, and they brought us to a curb bump out redesign that they did. And it was fantastic. It was the most enormous bump out I've ever seen. It turned a 6-way intersection into an actual like usable, walkable, rollable space. And what was really interesting is that they actually moved, I always forget the correct term for those, the curb cut, but it has the textured surface. They moved that to the end of the bump out, and they had these kind of like pathways, so that if you're using a mobility device or a cane to navigate, it actually kind of just like routes you to where the right place to cross the street is. It was really cool. And also just finally inspired it's a really good reminder of the work we're doing in Minnesota. A lot of people in the country face a lot more barriers, and it's a good kind of reality check about the work that we're doing and being able to feel good about kind of the collaborative nature of active transportation and getting kids to and from school.
That's great. Thanks so much, Angela. CJ, I know you were dropping in some links for the keynote speakers who were there. Did you have any other nuggets of wisdom to share, and then I'll throw it over to Natalie Gilly next.
Sure. Well, the main thing is just to echo what Angela was saying about how inspiring it was to see such great representation from Minnesota and to hear the success stories from our state. I went to a session around some of the challenges in the Midwest where we had 4 speakers from Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Indiana, and hearing them talk about their challenges and their context where they have 1 or 0 staff for the whole state trying to accomplish this work. Just made me extremely grateful to be practicing in a state where we do support things really well. I went to several sessions around kind of the mechanics of making projects happen in terms of who to talk to and getting things done. And from that, what stood out was how important in Minnesota our partnership with the Department of Health has been for kind of organizing, getting the right folks in the room, messaging, all the things that the MDH folks, especially in the SHIP work, are doing to help support this work. It's sometimes easy to take it for granted. We just might like to assume that that's happening everywhere, and that certainly is not the case. So really grateful for that. There was a couple of the keynote presentations that really stood out to me. I dropped some of the links for that. Anna Zevart's presentation in particular kind of concluded the conference and was a good reminder that 30% of our folks in our country are not driving for different reasons, whether it's disability or economic circumstances or choice, whatever it may be. But a substantial amount of people are not driving. And so to the extent that we continue to assume driving as a default mode of transportation, we are excluding many, many people. And so that's important to bring into kind of every conversation around transportation, and certainly affects safe routes to schools. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
That's great. Thanks, CJ. I do encourage folks to check out the links. Those are really great keynotes. Natalie?
Thanks,
Did you have
Kelly.
any? Yeah.
Sure, I echo all these really wonderful things that other folks have shared. I presented at the Safe Routes to School conference as well on the walking school bus, Superhero Steppers walking school bus out of Bemidji, Minnesota. I see Tony Clares is on here as well. We've been doing work to get more kids walking here in our community in the North Woods. And, you know, just some of the key takeaways from the conference for me, it was excellent to meet with the other folks from Minnesota, share stories, get to know them a little bit better, and hear some of the cool things that are happening in Minnesota that, you know, we aren't always aware of that are happening in other parts of the state. So that was inspiring in and of itself. I appreciated the resources that were available at the tables, especially reflective gear and some different resources I could bring home to share with other folks in the community here. The keynote by Dr. Gail Christopher was amazing. I felt like I was just in the presence of brilliance by hearing that. She presented about this truth, racial healing, and transformation framework and shared a number of links. And there's information that I will have to dig into a little deeper after the conference, and I'm still really processing, but lots of great things shared and a model there that helps people really connect with that. And she shared a list of books too, which was really cool because I'm a reader and it's always great to dive into some of those books. So some of the key learnings, walking school bus, some people have already shared the high school piece. That was something that stuck out to me too, that there was high school internships for the high school students to walk with middle schoolers. And that was pretty cool. It was an inspiration to get the middle schoolers to walk, where folks were seeing a drop off in participation at that age group. There was another key learning here, a phrase, no to a go, which Kaylin Henley shared in the walking school bus session that I co-presented with her on. She was sharing that as a focus on neighborhoods where kids aren't coming to school, to focus some of their work there. So go from a no to a go was the catchphrase there. Other things, I was really inspired by the presentation between the city of Fort Collins and their nonprofit in the area. It was interesting to hear how the city budget that allocates dollars for safe routes to school was the lead in their community, and then the nonprofit was the Sport of Peace. You know, it feels like, at least in a lot of the communities that I'm working in, is that we lead with the nonprofit and they're the ones that are on the ground doing a lot of the work, and we're advocating to try to get the support from the city. So it was really inspiring to hear some of the things that they were doing and how they were allocating the budget to lead from city staff. So that was really cool.
Thanks,
Let's see here. I
Natalie.
know we're short on time. I'll hand it back to you to close out. I see people going off mute, so we'll hand it back over. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share a little bit.
Yeah, thanks everybody for sharing out. And Natalie, I'm sorry, I would love it if we had another 15 minutes, because I just feel like everyone shared so many things that I would love to unpack and digest, but we will do that over the course of our continued work together. So I will just wrap us up super quick so folks can get on with their morning. We have our next network call on December 5th. We're going to be talking about active transportation safety education, and we'll be doing our year-end review. So talking through the results of our Safe Routes to School network survey, thinking a little bit about how that will inform our topics for 2025, our meetup for 2025. So if you have not taken the survey yet, now is your moment. Grab it out of the chat. I know Sophie posted it earlier. We will email it to you as a follow-up, but really want to highlight that you all completing that survey is what helps us make sure that we have a plan for 2025 that is grounded in the needs across the network. So please take a few minutes and take that survey sometime before the end of this month. And then we won't have a call in January. December will be our last one. And then we'll decide our network call dates, determined again based on the survey results. So if you like this time, take the survey and tell us that. If you don't like this time, take the survey and tell us that. And in the meantime, wishing you all the best of luck with your work. I appreciate everybody sharing out about the conference. And I will see you all in 4 short weeks. Take care.